and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah and today I will be talking to you about the 10 books that I read in March. So the first book that I read in March was A Rip Through Time by Kelley Armstrong. I gave this one 4 stars and I talked about it quite a bit in my time travel vlog. But if you didn't catch that, this book is following Mallory Atkinson, who is a homicide detective in Canada. She has gone to Scotland to visit her dying grandmother and finds herself sent back in time to the same date in 1869. And in the body of a housemaid named Katrina Mitchell, who was also attacked in the same way that she was. This book is basically her trying to look into how she could have possibly gone back in time, whether the guy who attacked her in 2019 might have possibly traveled back in time with her somehow, and trying to solve some murders that were happening in 1869 at the time that she is in. This book, I gave it 4 stars and I really enjoyed it. I really liked the writing style. I really liked the mystery elements of this. I actually have the second book from my library. I just haven't had a chance to pick it up yet that I want to continue reading. There are 2 books in this series plus a novella. I believe that the third one will be coming out here before too long as well. And I'm really interested to try it out. This book, I loved the look at forensics back in 1869 Scotland and what they had and hadn't discovered yet, what they hadn't thought of back in the day, as well as her trying to make connections with the people that she's having to live with, that she's having to live amongst. And it was really interesting. I had a really good time. This didn't quite hit 5 stars for me. It didn't wrap up some things the way that I wanted it to because it is a series. But like I said, I am really intrigued to continue with this and I really enjoyed it. I had a really great time. The next book that I read, I do not have it at the moment because it was a library book, but that is Kindred. I will put a picture up here. That was Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. And this is another one that I gave 4 stars. This was another one for my time travel vlog. This was about a girl who is a modern black woman in the 70s who finds herself going back in time to help her ancestor basically get out of trouble. And she is traveling back to the early 1800s. I believe it's like right around 1815, 1819. And she keeps going back to have to try and save him and help him. However, he is a white man in the early 1800s when slavery is still a huge aspect of life back then. And she is a black woman going back into this time. And so she is having to see slavery in a new light. Like I said, I gave this one like 4.5 stars. I thought it was written really well. I thought it was really, really interesting to read about and horrific in ways, and I really had a great time with it. The reason that I gave this one 4.5 and not 5 stars is I did not like how it ended. It wrapped up really nicely for the most part, but it got just a little bit confusing to me at the end. With the last time that she travels back through time, it was just kind of, I don't know, it was just kind of weird the way that it was done, and it was kind of odd for me, so that kind of knocked it down to me, and it wasn't quite a 5-star read for me. But it was still really, really good, and I highly recommend it. If you are interested in looking at like pre-Civil War type of books, this would be a really good option if you're looking at kind of that historical element in the book, as well as just kind of taking a realistic look at what it was like back then and the difficulties that people went through. And the horrors of like what was okay for white people to do back then and what they took advantage of and what they did. And it was really interesting to read it. And I thought it was written really well, like I said, and it was just really interesting. So that's why I gave that one 4.5 stars. The next book that I read was Recursion. This is by Blake Crouch, another one with time travel elements. This is about Detective Barry Sutton, who lost his daughter over a decade ago in a hit-and-run car accident, and he gets the opportunity to basically go back in time and change things and save his daughter. And it is also following Helena Smith, who is basically the creator of this time travel chair that allows for people to go back and change their histories, and what they go through and the outcomes of it, and all of that, and kind of how everything spirals out of control when they start playing with time. This book was another one that I gave 4 to 4.5 stars. I really liked this one. I previously read Dark Matter and I didn't care as much for that one, but this one I thought was done really, really well. I thought it was really interesting. I liked that they were playing with the time element. I liked how it switched back and forth in perspectives, to where sometimes you might know exactly what's happening and other times it might take you kind of a minute to catch up. He wrote this in such an interesting way that I was gripped. It's not a very long read, but it was so good. The reason that I did not give this 5 stars, personally for me, I felt like it got a little convoluted. It got a little technical. And so there were some things where he's talking about like the scientific aspects of this, and I felt like I kind of skimmed over some of that just because I didn't fully understand all of it. But overall, this was a really, really great book, and I really enjoyed it. And Blake Crouch, I'm curious to try something else by him now that I've had one that I didn't care for so much and one that I really enjoyed. But this one was definitely a win. It was really good. The next book that I read was another library book, and that was Here and Now and Then by Mike Chen. This one was another one that I gave 4.5 stars to, another one playing with time. This is about a man who travels back in time for a mission because he is some kind of a secret agent, and he finds himself stuck there. And so he has to just kind of wait and bide his time, and in the process he ends up living his life. He gets married, he has a daughter, and then the people from the future find him and they bring him back to his time and tell him, you screwed up, you were not supposed to do any of that, you've messed with time, and now we basically need to fix what you messed up. And so in doing so, he wants to live his life and like go back to his life in the future. However, he also has his daughter that he needs to think of, and he has to concern himself with. He doesn't want anything to happen to his daughter. He finds out that some things have changed, some things have happened, and he's able to communicate with her, but then he finds out that there's basically a hit out on his daughter because of that. And so this book is all about him trying to save his daughter one way or another, making sure that his daughter is able to have a good life. This book was so good. The ending of it gave me goosebumps. The connections that it made at the end, it did. It gave me goosebumps when I was reading it, and I had a really great time. My only thing with this one that kept it from being a 5-star was the characters were so flat. You have his futuristic wife, his wife from his own time. She is a chef. She's wanting to open a restaurant, and that's basically all there is about her. And it doesn't change, it doesn't, there's no character growth or anything like that. It's just the characters are super, super one note, I thought. But it was still so interesting. I liked that it was futuristic instead of going back into the past compared to the other things I read. And overall, I had a really, really great time with that book, and I really enjoyed it. So that's why I gave it 4.5 stars. And like I said, it gave me goosebumps with the connections that it made, and I had such a great time. The next book that I read in March was The Soviet Sisters. This is about Vera and Maria, who are Russian women who are in the military for Russia, and it's right after World War II, and everybody trying to get their bearings and figure out what's going on. And Maria has been sent to prison camps as a traitor to Russia and to like her country and to the military and stuff. She has been sent to a prison camp and been arrested. And this is about how 9 years later, her sister Vera is trying to look into her case and try and save her sister from the camps and getting her out of these prison camps. This book, it was interesting. I gave it 4 stars, and it was really really interesting. However, it did get really confusing because you're switching back and forth between the perspective of Maria in the time, what year was it? 1947. You're switching back and forth between her perspective in 1947 leading up to her getting arrested, and then you're also following Vera 9 years later when she's looking into her sister's case and doing a recording of herself talking about 1947 and what actually happened, trying to show whether her sister is actually a traitor or if she's innocent. So it gets kind of confusing, at least for me it did. I thought it got a little bit confusing. There were deceptions in this that were kind of hard to follow at times. It all came together really nicely at the end, but I just felt like it got kind of confusing. So this one I did give 4 stars. It was written well. It was really interesting. It was just a little bit confusing for me, and it wasn't something... I don't think it's something that I'm really going to remember like a long time down the road. I think it's one that I'm kind of going to forget about. And so that's why I didn't give it a higher rating than a 4. But I did really like the writing in this one, and I was really intrigued. The audiobook, I listened to the audiobook as well as reading this physically, and I thought that was done really well because it does change between 2 different narrators for the sisters. And I thought that helped a lot, especially starting out with being able to tell them apart of like who's talking about what and what's happening. I thought that helped a lot, and I really liked this book. I thought it was really good. It just didn't quite do, I don't know, it got confusing for me, and it made it difficult for me to give it a higher than a 4-star rating. Okay, the next book that I read was another one from the library, and that was No One Can Know by Kate Alice Marshall. This is a thriller about sisters who their parents were murdered in their house when they were young, and after that happened, they were sent into foster care. They all had a similar story that they told the police because whether anything happened that had anything to do with the sisters or not, they were going to make sure they all told the same story and no one could know the truth. And now, I think it was like 20 years later, one of the sisters, she ends up with her husband in a lot of trouble financially, and so she finds herself having to move back into their family home and facing those secrets once again, and having to try and connect with her long-lost sisters she hasn't spoken to since they were girls and got out of foster care. I ended up giving this one, let me double check. I gave this one 3 stars. I thought this book was fine. It is a thriller, and this is from an author that I've never read from before, so I was really curious to try one out from a new author. I didn't really care for it though. I thought it was very predictable, and I got really annoyed because the whole thing is no one can know, but really you kind of figure it out right from the beginning, so then you know. I didn't think that it was extremely surprising. I thought the twist right in the middle was the best twist out of the whole thing that I was like really excited about and thought it was going to get really good, and then it just really fell flat. So I thought this one was predictable. I wasn't super intrigued by it. It didn't take me very long to read it. I got it as like a lucky day pick from my library, so I had a week to read it, and it was fine. It just wasn't surprising enough. It wasn't twisty enough. It wasn't enough for me, and that's why I ended up giving it a 3-star rating, which is really unfortunate because I was hoping to find a new favorite, but that's just how it goes. Alright, so the next book that I read in March was The Mysterious Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. This is one that my mom loaned to me. She had a great time with this book, and so she gave it to me to read as well. This one is about Cecilia Bassingthwaighte. Her and her aunt, I believe, are lady pirates back in like the 1800s in London. And the whole concept with this is that they are women pirates, and instead of ships, they fly their houses around, and they steal, and a lot of them steal from each other because they're pirates, and there's a romance thrown in. And I mean, this thing I learned with this book that you kind of had to suspend any disbeliefs that you had, and you just had to accept it and go along for the ride, and then you will have a great time. This book was so fun once you kind of get started with it, and once it gets going, it is so much fun. I gave this one 4 stars. It was really fun. I didn't really connect with the characters a ton, but I had a lot of fun with it. I thought there was almost too many characters for what it was. There was a lot of names and a lot of people, but none of them were really explored a whole lot. But the banter between Cecilia and the guy was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. And I had a lot of fun with this one. So like I said, I gave this 4 stars, and I think it was a lot of fun, and I would be really curious to try the next one. But like I said, you just kind of have to just jump in and accept what it says and just go along for the ride, and then you can have a really great time with it, and then it's a lot of fun. So I gave this one 4 stars, and I'm really curious to try out the next one. My mom has bought the next 2 in the series, so I'm probably going to borrow them from her. And then her and I, we've tapped, between the two of us, she has the clear ones, I have the colorful ones, and yeah, we've tapped the crap out of this. Like I said, I love their banter. I had a really good time. I thought it was really fun. It was just kind of a crazy, wild ride. And so yeah, that's what I read. That was the next one that I read. Alright, so I have 3 more books, and my camera is flashing at me, so I will probably get cut off, so be warned. Alright, the next book that I read in March was Sanctuary of the Shadow, and this is a fantasy romance book about a girl who works with a carnival as the seer, and she is the last of her kind. There was somebody that came in and wiped out all of the seers when she was just a little girl, and she's the last one left. And the carnival that she works for takes in a guy that he is a wraith, and has him caged up, and she decides that she has some kind of a connection with him and wants to save him and make sure that he is safe, and ends up falling for him. This book, I gave it 2 stars. I rolled my eyes so much with this book. It was it may as well have been YA, other than the sex scenes and the language. Otherwise, it could have been YA. It was insta-love, it was miscommunication, it was just everything, and it was so disappointing. I was so bummed out reading this book, and I was so sad that I did not like it as much as I didn't like it. It is such a beautiful copy. It's got the sprayed yellow edges, the beautiful yellow end papers, and the foiling on the front. And it's such a beautiful book, and I was so excited to read it because the circus setting was really interesting to me. However, in this book, the circus itself is it takes a back seat. I thought there was going to be so much more with it in this book, and there's really not. It's the basic setting to start with, and that's really it. That's all there is about the circus. And her best friend is a trapeze artist. So I was so bummed with this book. I don't even want to talk about it very much, because this one is one that I will not be keeping. And I'm so bummed because I hated this book so much. And it could have been so much better in so many ways. And I don't know. Like I said, it felt like it was a YA that she put in some sex scenes, or a lot of sex scenes. I felt like there was 50 pages straight in the middle that was all sex scene. And it was just, I didn't like it, and I rolled my eyes so much. And then the ending of it, it basically wraps everything up in a little bow, and they live happily ever after. So yeah, I did not like this book at all. I'm super bummed, and yeah, I gave this 2 stars, and I will be unhauling this book as soon as this video gets posted. I'm so sad, but that's the way that it went. I knew it was lowest rated, but I was hoping for the best with this one, and I unfortunately did not like it. Now, on the other side of things, the next book that I read, the last one that was a part of my TBR for the month, was The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. This is a book that is about a girl, June, who her grandmother passes away, and she learns that there are actually secrets. Her mother disappeared when she was a kid, or like when she was just a baby. She was abandoned, and her grandmother has since raised her, and then her grandmother dies, and she starts learning that there's secrets that are surrounding her mother that she never knew about, she's never understood, and finds out that her grandmother, when her grandmother was dying, she would say that it was like having one foot in 2 different times, and like she was living 2 different lives. And so she starts to learn more about that and finds out that the Farrow women are actually cursed to be part of a time traveling like loop, basically. And so she finds out that her mother actually has connections not only to her, obviously in her time, but also back to, I think it's the 1920s. Has connections to the 1920s. She married a man in the 20s, and so she had this like whole other life in the century prior. And so she starts to uncover these secrets and learn about things like that. She's always said that she never wants to get married, she never wants to have kids, because the curse she feels is going to end with her. And she doesn't understand that curse, but as we move through the story, we start to understand it more. This book was incredible. This book was so good. It was intriguing right from the beginning. It was well paced. It wasn't a super like fast paced, but it was paced well enough to really, really keep your attention and keep you make you want to keep reading it. And the writing was gorgeous. The writing was incredible. You could visualize what was going on. The relationship in this book was so realistic, and I loved that, because it wasn't just a happy-go-lucky, fall in love, live happily ever after kind of a relationship. It was, I need to learn who you are, and I need to understand what's going on, and I need to build that relationship with you. I am not just gonna like be in love with you. It doesn't work that way. And I loved that. I loved the relationship in this book. I loved the family aspects of this book, that there are things where she isn't always trusted. She doesn't always trust people that she interacts with. Even if they're family, they're guarded against like how they want to feel about things. And it was done so well. And I gave this one 5 out of 5, hands down, no questions asked. I sent a picture of this book to my mom after I finished it, and I said, you need to read this book. This might possibly be one of my favorite books of the year, because it was so, so amazing, and I'm so glad that I bought it. I have never read anything by Adrienne Young before, but I really want to get something else by her, because this was just, it was perfect. Like I said, it was paced so well, and the storyline was so gripping. The mystery of it was really interesting, between the curse of her family, the murder that supposedly happened in the past that she never knew anything about, but it just was kind of something that happened in the town years ago. It was a small town. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew the drama of everybody else. And like everything about it, it was just done so well. And her descriptions of everything really made it to where you can imagine it in your mind. And it was just, like I said, this book was amazing. And I highly, highly recommend it. I told my mom that she really needs to read this book, but I told her she couldn't have it until after I finished this wrap up. So hopefully I will be taking this one down to her on Friday, so that way she can read it too, and I really hope that she's gonna love it. This book was amazing. Absolutely amazing. And last but not least, I started this book on the Friday, I think it was the 29th of March, and I actually technically finished it on April 1st, but I am going to include it here because I want to be able to talk about it and move on since I read most of it in March. And that is The Memory Collectors by Kim Neville. This is a debut novel with magical realism elements, and this is about 3 women, 2 of which are sisters. These sisters are Evelyn and Noemi, and Evelyn has a magical type gift where she can sense emotions that are attached to objects. Whether that be love or pride, fear or hatred or anger, whatever that may be, she can sense that. And it is something that she has had since she was a little girl, and she is scared to death of it. Her and her sister Noemi, they were orphaned when they were really young. Evelyn was 8 and Noemi was 4. And the story goes that her parents died in a murder-suicide tragedy. That their father kind of went nuts and killed their mother and then killed himself because of what Evelyn believes is because of he had the gift as well. So she is scared to death of it. The third woman that this is about is Harriet, and she is a woman, an older woman, I think she was in her 60s, who also has this gift, but she's on the other end of the spectrum that she sees it as a blessing, and she is a hoarder of these objects. She has her childhood mansion that she and her mother started it before she passed away, but then Harriet went in and she filled this mansion up to the brim, boxes upon boxes of stuff, and held on to all of it until nothing could fit, and this place was just packed full of things. She also has an apartment in the city that she has filled up with these things, and because of that, other people can sense emotions attached to things without knowing what it is. So if there's too many emotions in one place, it causes headaches and nausea, and it just can really mess with your mind, even though you don't know what is actually happening. So because her apartment is completely filled floor to ceiling with all this stuff as well, it's starting to have an effect on her neighbors. They're starting to have headaches, they're starting to have problems. And so Harriet enlists Evelyn's help because they met by chance, and she enlists her help in starting up a museum, basically a museum of feeling. And so they were wanting to take these objects and create spaces to where you can move through this museum and witness and interact with all these different objects to get different sensations, different feelings, different emotions. And all of it kind of circles back to what happened to Evelyn and Noemi when they were children, and with what happened to their parents. Now, Evelyn and Noemi, they haven't spoke to each other in 6 months. Noemi comes back and she really, really wants to understand what happened in their past, whereas Evelyn has pretty much locked everything up in a box in her mind and doesn't want anything to do with it and doesn't want any memories of it. And so this book is all about them kind of having to cope with that and figure things out between their sister relationship, as well as Evelyn having to learn how not to be scared of living. It kind of reminded me at one point of like Frozen, that Elsa always wears her gloves so that way like she can protect people from her magic. And that's basically what Evelyn does, is how she looks at her life, and she always wears these white gloves to not feel all these emotions and kind of keep herself distanced from it. But this book is about her trying to learn how to not be afraid of her power anymore, and how to be able to explore it and do good things with it rather than have bad things happen. And this book was really interesting. I ended up at 4 stars for it. So this book was extremely slow paced for the first like 3/4 of it, but that last little bit of it, that last quarter of the book, kind of almost got the suspensefulness of a thriller for me and bumped it up to a 4-star. It got so good and so interesting that I did not want to put this book down. I really enjoyed it. Like I said, the beginning of this book was super, super slow, but the last of it got really good. I really liked seeing the growth of Evelyn, her kind of learning about herself and not being afraid of her powers and actually just learning how to live her life. And it was really interesting to watch that because she really had put herself in a cage basically because she was just so afraid of these emotions that were attached to everything that she just didn't want to live her life. And she was just so afraid of everything that she just didn't want to live her life. And so I thought it was really interesting to see the growth in her. And also Harriet having to come to the realization that what she was doing by hoarding all of these objects and holding on to all of these objects was really harmful, not just to her, but to the people around her. Everybody in her apartment building, and the fact that all the emotions were not always good emotions attached to these objects, and they could really hurt people. And so I thought this book was really interesting. Like I said, it was really slow at times, but it was so good. It was very descriptive, almost overly descriptive at times. But this was also Kim Neville's debut novel. And I think especially for a debut novel, it was done really well. And I had a really good time with it. So like I said, I ended up giving this one 4 stars. So overall, I read 10 books in March. And I had a really great reading month. I had mostly 4 to 4.5 stars. I had a 1 star, I had a 5 star, and the rest were pretty much 4 stars. I had a really great time, which is also why I read 10 books. So if you have read any of these books and enjoyed them, if I have convinced you to try out reading The Unmaking of June Farrow or any of these others, please let me know. I would love to hear from you. And I really hope that I can influence you to potentially pick one of these up or finally get motivated to read them. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, comment down below. Like I said, let me know if you've read any of these books, if I piqued your interest on any of these books to want to try them out yourself. And I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!